Happy holidays, everybody! Welcome! This is Module 5.1. We got a big one today. We're taking a look at how tension over slavery came to the surface before the Civil War. That's right. We are now on to Unit 5. Unit 5 is the Civil War and Reconstruction. It's how the country was torn apart and put back together again. Today we're going to take a look at how the country was torn apart. Important vocabulary you need: popular sovereignty, Zachary Taylor, Missouri Compromise, Wilmot Proviso, Gold Rush, Stephen Douglas, Compromise of 1850, let's put, I'm going to say Bleeding Kansas, and stratification. All right, so let's start off. I'm going to go back to do some I forgot the question. To what extent did the spirit of compromise collapse as the nation moved closer to civil war? That is your focus question. To what extent did the spirit of compromise collapse as the nation moved closer to civil war? Today we're going to be taking a look at the period from 1820 to 1850. So some of the stuff I brought up before, but I just want to bring it up again because it becomes stupid important as we get going. All right, so let's begin by going back to 3 slides that you had during the Monroe administration. Particularly, let's talk about the peculiar institution in the South that we know as slavery. Okay, we've mentioned this before, and we've talked about it here and there, but it's going to become really, really important, and that is going to become the balance of power between the North and the South. And the West is going to be kind of the buttress that's going to kind of work between the two. The South has one singular interest at stake here, and the South wants to protect its way of life. And the way of life in the South depends on the economic institution of slavery. Slavery is the lifeblood of the Southern states. They want to make sure they can keep slavery. They don't want to let slavery go. By the late 18-teens, there are going to be 9 states that had joined the Union since the founding, but luckily the balance of power had been kept between slave and free. However, the North began to grow in population more than the South, and because the House of Representatives in Congress is based upon population, that means that the Northerners are going to have more representation in Congress because they have more people. So that's in the House of Representatives. However, the Senate is going to remain equal because the Senate, you have 2 senators per state. So with the Senate, you are going to have basically equal representation. So that means the South isn't going to be able to gain go to disadvantage in the Congress because they still have the people in the Senate. That's going to start to change in 1819. In 1819, Missouri is going to petition for statehood as a slave state. That would sway balance towards the slave states. Northerners are upset about this because Northerners see this as, well, we don't want the Southerners to come in, because if the Southerners come in and they have more power than us, they can start to pass laws that will begin to protect the institution of slavery. And that's something that we don't want to see. So, Senator Talmadge proposes an amendment to Missouri statehood, which basically stipulates no more slavery could be brought in. We'll let Missouri come in as a slave state, but we're going to allow for gradual emancipation. The South says, oh, hell no, that is an affront to our rights. That is an affront to the rights of the states and the states' rights to have slavery. So in order to take a look, we'll look at this map, we'll come back to it. Here are the slave states, here are the free states. And then the West is kind of up for grabs, and the Missouri Compromise is going to result. The Missouri Compromise is one of the compromises that is going to be engineered by Henry Clay. Basically, it is just going to try to maintain the balance of slave and free states. Missouri will come into the country as a slave state in exchange for Maine, which had been part of Massachusetts previously, is going to be carved out as its own state, and that's going to be brought in as a free state. So that means the balance will be 12 to 12. However, they want to create a mechanism for the future to make sure that this issue doesn't come up again, and that is going to be the 3630 line, the southern border of Missouri, right here. They're going to draw that line across the map and say that line is going to represent And anything below that will be a slave state. Anything above that will be a free state. And that's going to be seen as the compromise at that time. And this is going to continue for about 30 years until 1850. And we're going to see this is going to cause problems later on. But this is going to create a momentary compromise over the issue of slavery. So let's go back into national politics. After the Spanish-American War, 1848, James Polk does not seek re-election, so we have a battle of the generals for the White House. Two generals, heroes of the Mexican-American War, are both trying to get elected. Basically, we got to remember this is the era of weak presidents, and both political parties realize generals can get people to sway. We got to think Jackson. We got to think Washington. People like generals. Harrison was also a general they brought in. So Democrats are going to put up General Lewis Cass. Okay, there's Cass right there. He was from the War of 1812. He pushed the idea of popular sovereignty. So in the areas that we got when we kicked Mexico's behind all over the place, in those areas, Lewis Cass said those areas would vote on whether or not they would want to come into the country as slave or free states. That was the big idea that he was pushing. Because the 3630 line is not extending into the Mexican cession. So once we get all of this land, the South is basically licking their chops because they see this as great new slave territory. And they want to expand slavery into this Mexican region. They think that's going to give them more states. They thought they could carve like 4 states out of Texas to give them, to give them a lot of sway. And they want those to be slave states. So Lewis Cass is pushing the idea of popular sovereignty, the idea of the vote, that potentially opens up more slave states. The Whigs are going to put up General Zachary Taylor from the Mexican-American War. Look at that mug. He looks like somebody you don't want to mess with. Am I right or am I wrong? So the Whigs avoid any kind of weighty politics. They try to run something to, he's a general and, good times, America, rah, rah, sis, boom, bye, yeah, we won the war, woohoo, kind of a platform, and that's going to kind of help them out. There is going to be a third party in this election, though. It's going to be the Free Soil Party. The Free Soil Party is exactly what it sounds like. We want our land to be free. And the Free Soil Party is going to come out in support of the Wilmot Proviso. And the Wilmot Proviso is a proposal from Congressman Wilmot. And basically what it says is that the Mexican cession, the territory that we kicked Mexico's butt for and took, there will be no slavery in that area. Also, the Free Soilers from the north are advocating for internal improvements. They want to give land to new settlers. Free soil, free speech, free men. And they are absolutely opposed to slavery of any kind in the West. The election of 1848 comes, and Taylor is going to cash in on his popularity. He is the hero of the Mexican War. He is going to win the day. Taylor did not consider himself a Whig, but as an independent, and that is also going to be something that is going to create tension as we go forward, because here you have another case where the Whigs have basically put a politician in power that is not necessarily one of theirs. Remember John Taylor, right? Tippecanoe and Tyler too. Well, Tyler became president. He was kind of like the Democrat in Whigs clothing. Well, now you've got another kind of wild cannon in this power, and the Whigs basically sold themselves just to get the presidency, thinking they could control somebody, but they got a general they're not really going to be able to control. Okay, California is going to be, everything's going to be going okay, and then California is going to be the X factor. Everybody knew that California eventually would come into the state as a union, come into the union as a state, but nobody thought it would come in this quickly. 1848, something happens. They discover gold in California. All right, and there's an easy way to remember this. What is the name of San Francisco's football team? The 49ers. That's because in 1849, after gold is discovered, there is a gold rush from people to go to California in order to find gold and to get rich quick. You have people going across the wild prairie of the West in the Oregon Trail. You actually have people like going in ships all the way around South America to try to get to California, and that's what this is an advertisement for. Basically trying to mine, prospect, and get rich off from the gold. You have a lot of lawless men, you have crime increasing, the territorial government doesn't have enough resources, so what they want to do is they want to become a state so that they can get the protection of the federal government, they can help protect their people. Now, there's an issue with this. California is petitioning to come into the country as a free state. Their constitution prohibited slavery. Now, this is going to basically draw into question, if I can go back up to my previous map. All right, so California is over here, and this is going to draw into question this entire Missouri Compromise line. Because what do we do in the states that we carve out of the Mexican Cession? If we draw the Missouri Compromise line across, California is both above and below the Missouri Compromise line. So, would California be a free state or would it be a slave state? This is going to be a big issue because in 1848 there is a precious balance of 15 and 15. 15 free states, 15 slave states. The South is also running out of potential slave states. When we take a look in this area, you have New Mexico, Utah, and California. They all look like they are developing into anti-slave states, and they are below the Missouri Compromise line. And this is going to be bad. Texas has big, huge tracts of land, and that is prime slave territory, but they did not want to break up. So, you know, a lot of the Southerners wanted to break Texas up into different states so that way they could give them more power, but Texas did not want to break up. And on top of this, in Washington, D.C., you have a lot of people that are starting to push to end slavery in Washington, D.C. The northern population just keeps expanding. That means the northern advantage in the House of Representatives keeps getting bigger and bigger, and also because the Northerners have more population, that also is going to end up starting to give them an edge when it comes to the Electoral College. So the South is really worried that they've lost the House of Representatives. They're losing their grasp on the presidency, and it's only a matter of time until they lose the Senate. And if they see those three things, if they lose the Senate, the House of Representatives, and the presidency, then they really start to lose the grasp of slavery in this country, because the factions seeking to end slavery are really going to try to kind of come in. Put into this the problem of runaway slaves. We know Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. We know this story about how slaves are escaping into the North in order to get their freedom. Now, this is starting to become a big problem for the South. More than 1,000 slaves a year are runaways. And basically the South is starting to get really upset about this because they see the Northerners as undermining their livelihood, taking away what they need to survive. And in the South, there is a big groundswell for what we call a fugitive slave law. They want a law to protect against slaves running away. They actually want to make it so that the slaves can't run away and that they are protected, and that any Northerners can help capture runaway slaves. So in 1850, there is a big debate here. When California wants to come in, how can this balance be preserved? This is going to be the final show for the big three in Congress. Henry Clay from the West, Daniel Webster from the North, and John C. Calhoun from South Carolina. They are going to basically go in and they're going to try to negotiate this. You got Clay, the great pacificator. He is the great compromiser. He is the one that has put the Compromise of 1820 together. He's the one that negotiated the compromise over the nullification crisis during the Jackson administration. He has the reputation as the man who's trying to keep the Union together. You have John C. Calhoun, the great nullifier, who almost tore the country apart during the Jackson administration with the nullification crisis. And you have the great orator, Daniel Webster, who passionately speaks out against slavery. And Basically, who's going to win in 1850? What they do is they go in and they hash out a new compromise. This new compromise is going to be known as the Compromise of 1850. And the Compromise of 1850 is going to be huge. The Compromise of 1850 is going to basically be seen as the way forward. How do we come to terms with this issue of slavery, and how can we still try to placate all parts of the country facing the new realities? California will be admitted as a free state. The territory under dispute in Texas and New Mexico is going to be surrendered to New Mexico. Texas used to be bigger, New Mexico gets some new territory. And they abolished the slave trade, but not slavery itself in Washington, D.C. That's what the North gets. The South gets the remainder of the Mexican cession and the area formed in the territory of New Mexico and Utah from the Louisiana Purchase will be open to what is known as popular sovereignty. So that means that those areas can vote whether they be free or slave. That means areas north and south of the 3630 line could potentially become slave states. That is going to be huge for the South. So let me go to this map. All right, basically 3630 lines here. Kansas, Utah, and parts of Nebraska. All of this could potentially be opened up to slavery if those areas vote for slavery. So that's going to be very big for them. Texas will receive $10 million from the federal government as compensation from the land they had to give to New Mexico. And the South got a fugitive anti-slave law that they wanted. So this is going to be seen as the way forward, but as we're going to see, it's going to cause some issues. There's immediately going to be tension within the Tyler administration. William Seward from New York, he's an ardent anti-slaver. He comes out against the compromise. He comes out and says the country must yield to the higher law and not give in to slavery. You start to see the Northerners digging in their heels. You start to see in the Northerners, abolitionists are really starting to gain support within Congress. So you don't have the people that are willing to compromise. Even though this compromise comes out, you have the younger generation represented by Seward that are saying, no, we can compromise now, but that doesn't negate the fact that slavery is wrong, and we need to do something against slavery. Texas was ready to seize New Mexico, ready to seize Santa Fe by force from New Mexico. They didn't like that they had to give that away. Taylor saw Seward in New Mexico as a threat, and Taylor, being the cowboy general he is, he's ready to go and start sending troops in. And basically, the Civil War could have basically broken out right then and there. So what happens? Well, before anything could happen, Zach Taylor dies. His vice president, Millard Fillmore, becomes president in 1850. Taylor dies because of disease. And the South wasn't happy, but they did accept the Compromise of 1850. Now, that compromise is going to anger many, many people. As we saw with Seward, people are starting to dig their heels in. They're not entirely happy. One second. So, the North is going to be up in arms about the compromise, mostly because of the Fugitive Slave Law. The Fugitive Slave Law is going to anger Northerners upside and down because slaves are denied a jury trial. Okay, so slaves can't even put their case before a jury. Judges are going to receive $10 for every slave that they return, but only $5 for every slave that they free. So the justice system is actually working against the interest of returning slaves. Northerners are going to come out in open violation of the law that stated that they had to help capture runaway slaves. This is going to really anger the North. They're going to double down on this, and they're going to start to actively help out in helping slaves escape. The South basically is looking at this as they lost the Senate. So the compromise is really going to serve to anger some people. And this is going to really start to get people going. Now, let's go back to our focus question. Okay, these two we're going to ignore for now. So don't worry about stratification and Stephen Douglas. We'll get those later. To what extent did the spirit of compromise collapse as the nation moved closer to civil war? We'll look deeper into this as we get back to it. Have a great break, everybody, and I look forward to having your modules when we come back. Goodbye.